gained the lead.
Hey, I'm Ryan McCaffrey with IGN. We are here at 343 Industries with secret access to Halo 4. Not so secret because you're here. Kynan Pearson, the lead multiplayer level designer at 343 on Halo 4. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. How are you doing?
Doing great. So you're here to show us. We're going to take a guided tour. We're going to dig into your brain, and you're going to tell us all about your motivations, various strategies, various things about the fiction of each of the Halo 4 multiplayer maps. So which one should we start with?
Let's go ahead and get started with Abandon. So this map, it takes place on the surface of Erebus 7, and it's basically a science facility where they were doing research on the things that happen on this planet. Unfortunate circumstances occurred, and no one's there now, but the map is here to play on. So this is actually a smaller scale 4v4 map.
Okay.
It's great for objective modes. It's non-symmetrical in its design, but it's balanced in terms of what you get on both sides and the opportunities that those provide.
So if it's asymmetrical, is this best or maybe not best for something like Capture the Flag, where it's, we need two flags going? Does it make it more interesting, or is it more suited for something like just a Team Slayer?
It's definitely geared towards certain modes like Team Slayer or Flood.
Okay.
But we have tuned everything to function with CTF so that we balance things out to make sure that teams don't have any significant advantages. They might have a few things here or there that give them different tactics that they have to use.
Right.
But the maps are tuned and balanced so that it functions with something like CTF well, so that you're not going to have a lopsided experience.
So as we're looking around here, this is definitely a bit of a different look than most Halo maps we've seen in the past. It's reminding me a little bit, maybe just because it's got sort of an organic look outside, of Backwash, back from Halo 2. Just with all the overgrowth and trees and vines and such. But obviously we've got a big base in the middle of this too. So where are the combat points? Where should we be looking to start a fight?
Yeah, so a lot of times in various modes, there's going to be some control points and some places where encounters tend to happen a lot. This being one of the areas where it's the wide open combat area on the open side that kind of looks out.
Oh, cool.
A lot of the map flows in towards the center. So you have a route that goes up here towards the center three-story structure. This three-story structure is where a lot of interesting combat happens, because you've got the top deck, which gives you some lines of sight down into the outer areas of the map. So you can kind of defend these locations, but again, with any defensible location, there's multiple routes to get in. So people can get in from the base on the backside. They can use the lift in the center bottom, and they can also use the kind of ramp area that leads out into the open side. So there's three areas that they can get in, and then there's some sneaky routes that people can come in with jetpack, or you can run in from the second level, which interconnects to all of the outer routes, and then there's a ramp that goes straight up.
This looks like it could be really fun for either King of the Hill or Oddball too, if everything sort of funnels to that center, but it's 3 stories.
Absolutely. It also works out really well for Regicide, which is one of our free-for-all modes where the player in lead is king. So here's the other base, which again, there's routes on all of the outer edges, which give you some interesting cover from people that are defending that top mid, as well as some long lines of sight as people are kind of running in. And there's equivalence on both sides, but they're definitely different flow and different layout to give you some variety and spice and different usable areas.
Now there's not a whole bunch of open space here. There's a lot of cover points with the trees and such, so probably not a good map for sniper rifles or long-range weapons.
We still do provide some fairly long strips that you can fire on people almost clear from one side to the other, but they're very controlled areas where that happens. But then you also have some certain high ground areas that still give you plenty of long strips that you can kind of control. So there are choice locations in the map that do give you, some fairly significant distance to cover with sniper weapons and long range weapons, DMR, BR. So I wouldn't say that it's not best suited to those weapon types. There are opportunities to use them, but you'll definitely find more often some close and mid-range combat opportunities.
Now, are there any armor abilities that might be well suited to this level, or is that just more depending on which game type you're in?
We did a lot of work to make sure that each of our maps allowed the armor abilities to function in their own unique ways, and that there's areas that kind of support those. So Jetpack will give you the ability to kind of cover some ground and get into the multiple stories of the structure, but it's not going to be the most advantageous thing to use. Like, you've got Promethean Vision, which is going to give you some opportunities to catch people coming around corners and get the drop on them. Thruster Pack is going to give you some really nice ways of closing distance. Also, you know, the shield will give you some opportunities to kind of defend your location and hole up in a certain area.
Well, what armor abilities do you like to take when you find out that you're going to be playing this level?
For the most part, I tend to use Thruster Pack because it gives you lots of opportunities to, whenever you can see somebody on your radar or you're running towards a location where you know that they're at, you can thrust in to close the distance, get melees off so you can kind of engage somebody with a BR, DMR, light rifle, carbine, and then thrust in to kind of do a finisher with melee, or even just to kind of catch up with people. You can thrust in to get there. I also like Promethean Vision just because it gives you an opportunity to catch people coming around corners and get the first shot off.
Now, how does a map like this start life? Do you start with that 3-story structure and build it out? Where does the idea come from, and how has this map evolved over the course of development of Halo 4?
Yeah, so the map has kind of stuck to the original design layout, which is basically that you've got the outer pads and then the central structure. We know up front that we want to try and hit a certain quantity of close quarters maps, a certain quantity of small scale, mid scale, and large scale maps. Mm-hmm. So we kind of have general concepts about what we would do with each of those maps, and then we make sure that they function with each other so that we're giving players enough variety.
Okay.
So something like this was always meant to be a small scale map to fit in with the other styles that we have, but it's probably best that we look at some of the other levels to see how this compares before actually going into some of the details of why the layout choices are there.
Are there any Easter eggs or hidden nuggets that you guys have buried in here anywhere?
Yeah, so from a fictional standpoint, this bottom area has this little lab that has these creatures kind of
what are those?
Well, those are mysterious creatures that are native to this planet. So we're not talking about the specific details of what they are, but yeah, it's just something that the science team had captured and are studying.
I noticed you went by them quickly. We didn't take too good a look there. Although actually, that's a cool effect. And one other thing right here, it looks like, can we go flying off the edge to our death there if you take the wrong step in battle?
Absolutely, suicide. Won't do it now, but definitely you will kill yourself if you run and jump off of the edge.
All right, so for more on all 10 Halo 4 multiplayer maps, keep it locked right here to IGN. Hey, I'm Ryan McCaffrey with IGN. We're here at 343 Industries getting a behind-the-scenes tour of all 10 Halo 4 multiplayer maps. I'm joined by Kynan Pearson, the lead multiplayer level designer on Halo 4. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for coming down and taking a look at these with us.
Oh, happy to be here. So, we're going through all 10 maps. Which one are we going to look at here?
So we're going to take a look at ADRIFT. This is a small-scale competitive map. It's symmetrical in layout. ADRIFT is a mining vessel that was converted to support the war effort. So let's jump in.
Let's do it. So you talked in one of our other videos about having sort of buckets of maps. You've got some big-scale maps, maybe some team objective-based things, some smaller scale. You mentioned this is a competitive map. So is this aimed at one-on-one, two-on-two, MLG type stuff?
Absolutely. This is for our objective modes, but the thing that makes this definitely a little more specifically built for competitive play is that it's symmetrical. So there are no distinct tactical advantages for either side. There's no differences in play style. The layouts are symmetrical, even though there's some asymmetrical art components. That being said, those don't interfere with the gameplay of the map. So this map, in particular, has a kind of a cylindrical layout. You have routes that go around the outer edge of the map. So as you can see, you've got these kind of hallways that interconnect into the central chamber. But you've got some reinforceable locations, some cover, and then there's these man cannons that will do a quick launch that get you over into the main team spawn points and the objective locations. So
is the gravity affected at all? Because we appear to be floating. Are we in space or are we on a planet here?
This is actually over the surface of a planet. It's flying in low orbit. It's low enough to where you've got all of the gravity that the planet has. Okay. So as you're going here, none of the gravity is affected. This is your standard jump heights. And then there's these routes that will take you up into this kind of center area. So as you can see out here, there's plenty of cover. There's some elevation changes, but there's lots of different routes that you go. You can get some long lines of sight down the halls for defensive, but again, whenever you're focusing on these areas, you're leaving your back exposed, and there's all these different routes that get into the main spawn locations and objective locations.
I know you guys try to tune everything to be friendly to any and all playstyles, but I'm getting a sense here that playing rockets only on this map could be a heck of a lot of fun.
Absolutely. There's plenty of areas, like if you see that there's these upper deck routes, you can make skill jumps to get to these so that you can go back and forth. It's not a tough jump, but it's one of those things where in the heat of battle it can be, so you have to make a commitment to get up towards those. But the great thing is that there's corners that you can deal with where you get splash damage, you can ricochet grenades into areas where people are camping out and hiding. Everything's kind of measured in terms of being able to do, jumping and sprints. But then there's this lower area. So because you have the level tiers and whatnot, doing things like firing rockets down, it gives you plenty of time to kind of hit walls or hit the ground to get explosive damage. And
now, did you take any inspiration from any earlier Halo levels for this? Because I guess it's sort of an archetypal design, a center area with some multi-tiered areas immediately surrounding it. Does this remind you of anything, or was it inspired by anything in particular?
We did take inspiration from a lot of prior Halo maps in terms of the general concepts behind the layouts, but this one in particular wasn't directly inspired by or isn't kind of a recreation of a specific element, though it does have some familiar components.
Given the verticality here, I imagine a jetpack might be a good universal armor ability to equip on this level.
While jetpack can be good for covering some of the distances and being able to get up on these areas, we did leave on-foot routes that made it easy enough for players to access different areas and get up into the sections that they want without having to rely on a specific armor ability.
What armor abilities are there one or two or three that when this level comes up you really like to go to them?
Yeah, for this level in particular, I tend to use Promethean Vision. I do use the shield as well, though from my personal play style, I tend to stick to doing things like Thruster Pack, which allows you to kind of, again, whenever you're getting into a firefight with somebody, you can kind of hop out of danger and get behind cover fairly easily and change your weapon.
Now, what is that large object in the very center of this map?
So in the center of the map, the kind of centerpiece and the landmark that players will recognize, and one of the focal points, is there is a mech being constructed. So this is not the Mantis. This is actually a different proto-mech. And let me get a better view of it so that you can see.
And I take it from your usage of the term being constructed, that we will not be hopping in this, certainly not in this multiplayer level.
Yeah, you definitely can't use the proto-mech in this map. So the other thing is that you have these little riggings on the outside, but if you do end up strafing off or you're engaging somebody, there's these safety nets on the outside to make sure that you don't go careening to your death unless you specifically, you know, kind of actively work towards doing something risky that might do that for you.
Now, were those railings, were those safety railings always there throughout the course of development, or did you guys add them after flying off accidentally too many times and getting frustrated?
Yeah, anytime you're building a map, we go through a lot of tests. We play test all the time. We play with each other and just make sure that that certain things that happen accidentally or whatever, that we start designing around those to prevent those actions from happening. Typically, we know that that can happen on a map whenever we're in the layout phase. But if we do find some trouble spots where it seems like, you know, people are backpedaling off of a map or whatever, we will do something like add support railings to prevent that and make sure that they've got that bit of a safety net. Because a lot of times when it's hectic, when you're fighting people, multiple targets, and you're kind of moving around, you're not paying attention to what you're backpedaling into.
Definitely not.
So there are still some choice locations where, you know, there's risk involved, where we have things like that. But if you see here, we've got like a lip that goes out, so you will kind of see yourself parallaxing past the railing and realize that your, you know, impending doom is approaching. So yeah, there's some quick routes to get up, like these, which people tend to use at the immediate start whenever they spawn if they want to get into that center area quickly and be on the upper deck. But then again, everything kind of converges into the center where you have these routes that go down, and then you get a bunch of these engagements where you can kind of run in on people that are in those areas, or you can hop back into the halls.
Now, if everything sort of converges to the center, of course, that's the design of the map. Where are the power weapons in this map, and what are they?
So the initial ordnance can change depending on the modes. It depends on what you're playing and what the objective type is, but we do have the sword spawns here between the mech's legs. You get scatter shot and sticky detonator on the outer areas. Right now they're turned off for this kind of walkthrough, but out here you'll get an opportunity to pick up the scatter shot, sticky det. And then we do have needler and sniper. Sometimes you'll get sniper rifle out here.
Did you just say sticky detonators?
Yeah, the sticky detonator.
Can you talk a little bit about that? I don't believe a lot of us might be familiar with that.
So the sticky detonator is a new weapon. It's probably best if I show you, but just to describe it, and we can definitely do that. It's a explosive weapon. You can fire the detonator onto a location, and then it's got a timer. And after that timer exceeds, it's going to automatically explode. But it's a fairly long amount of time. But you can pretty much choose to pull the trigger and detonate the detonator at any time whenever you see enemies approaching. So you can, you know, put them in doorways. You can kind of try and launch them at people in combat. They do have a little blinking light, and they make a distinct noise that is a tell for where they're located. So you can be cautious if you're running around. It's not as easy to just fully camp an area.
Right.
But that being said, there are some ways to fire it at choice times and put it in some key locations that you can definitely catch people off guard.
If you do happen to catch it as the on defense, can you shoot it to explode it, or perhaps use your hard light shield to move past it without being killed?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the hard light shield can give you some defensive capabilities from the splash damage if you're facing it. Again, you'll get caught by the damage if it's around the shield. But yeah, like going back to what you were originally saying, you can shoot it as well to detonate it early. So if you do see one, there are ways to approach without necessarily taking damage.
Now this looks like that's quite the large ship there off to the side. That Is there any narrative context for that? I see the UNSC logo on the side there.
Yeah, so it was a mining vessel at one point in time, and they recommissioned it to use it for the war effort. So while it wasn't originally built for the purposes of war, you know, during battle you kind of have to take what you get. So they took this and basically reinforced it and made it function for their military purposes.
All right, so that is ADRIFT, a symmetrical, competitive-based map, multi-tier, with some verticality. Check it out. And for more on all 10 Halo 4 multiplayer maps, keep it tuned right here to IGN.
Enemy flank down. Enemy flank down. Protect your flag. Carrier kill.
Hey, I'm Ryan McCaffrey from IGN here at 343 Industries. I'm joined by Kynan Pearson, the lead multiplayer level designer on Halo 4. Kynan, you are going to give us a tour of all 10 Halo 4 multiplayer maps. And which one are we taking a look at now?
So now we're going to take a look at Complex. So Complex is one of our mid-scale, mid-large scale maps. It's got small vehicle support, so you can use the Ghost and Mongoose on the map. And like the name implies, it's a complex layout with lots of ins and outs and different avenues that you can use. This is basically Galileo base, and it's kind of a makeshift base that the UNSC had put on the surface of Requiem.
Okay.
They're doing some research here, and they're extracting a Forerunner artifact.
Well, let's take a look. So really, I've never personally been able to get a great handle on the best use for a Mongoose. Is it really just from getting from point A to point B, or hauling flag carriers? It's, you know, what's on Complex? What's the best use for a Mongoose?
Well, the Mongoose is actually really good for objective game types. So if you have somebody capturing the flag, they can get on the back of the Mongoose. So if they have a driver, it's a really quick way with a coordinated team to kind of do flag captures and to get from objective type to objective type. One of the other things, though, is you can splatter people. It gets you out of bad combat situations. It's also a good way to get back to your teammates.
Yeah.
So it's a multi-purpose vehicle, and there's a lot of things that the Mongoose does really well. It's just not for the, it doesn't have an express purpose of doing damage or being an effective vehicle for combat situations unless your rider has a power weapon.
So this is a pretty good size level. It's a little reminiscent of some of the set of Forge maps from Reach, I'd say, maybe just as in general. But what are some of the combat points in here? It looks like you can hop up on some of these rooftops.
Yeah, absolutely. Complex was one of the maps that during development, whenever we had all of our custom loadouts in play, we needed to find a way to have a map that had lots of different and distinct combat encounter areas and stuff for objectives. One of the things that we did was we knew that we wanted the idea of having these kind of this strategic locations like the rooftops. So we've got these counter rooftop combat areas that allow you multiple routes to get up onto these, so you can basically access the rooftops very easily from any direction, regardless of having you know, the jetpack. But also, while this gives you some long lines of sight to cover certain specific areas, you're left fully exposed. There's no cover up here. But getting back, I guess, to the original point that I was talking about with the distinct purposes for the locations in the map, a lot of times when you have sprint by default or vehicles, your maps can tend to draw people towards a center location if you're not doing some very specific things to prevent that. So while this is a center location in the map's been tuned so that the majority of combat doesn't actually happen in this area specifically. This is just a nexus or a junction point to allow you to access different areas of the map. So we were very, we made a lot of specific choices to open up separate combat areas all across the map. So you have the interior area in here, which is part of this nexus for connecting the various portions. But you have this location right here where they're extracting the Forerunner artifact. So this ends up being a bit of a combat space back in here, control-wise. just because it's a good flow through for vehicles and it gives you full access to all of the routes of the map. The other areas of control are the building tops, the cross rooftops, which again I said have these accessible points, these ramps that give you easy access to reach these from various sections of the map.
So it seems like all these rooftops and outdoor expanses a bit, very battle rifle, carbine, DMR, light rifle friendly on this map.
Yeah, mid to long range weapons will be very effective on this map. There are ample opportunities to have some close range encounters whenever you're inside some of the structures and kind of reinforcing these little building areas, but you'll definitely want to have a mid-range weapon on you because it's strategically a good choice for a map of this type.
Now, how has this map evolved over the course of the design? What was it originally sketched up as, and sort of how, as you guys were playtesting it, how has it changed?
So one of the things that I personally love in Halo, and something that Halo does really well, is it allows you to have combat while you're jumping around. So you can fire while you're jumping freely, and having these little ninja routes and little shortcuts for jump routes was something that I wanted to express through a map that allowed for some more strategic play for advanced and mid-level players. So the level's accessible and easy to get into, but again, it's a complex layout with lots of ins and outs. So one of the things that happened early on was I was including a lot more jump routes to get onto the top of certain structures and surfaces. Over time, those have evolved so that some of the jump portions have been removed to make it easier, but as you can see, like this is
plenty of ramps.
Plenty of ramps, and that's one of the areas where the map has evolved and changed pretty significantly over the course of its creation. But as you can see, you're still required to use the jumps to get into certain areas and to get into choice locations, but they're not required nearly as much as in the original version.
I'm seeing, of course, we have the light vehicles, but we've got a pretty big expanse of outdoor ground here. No Warthog. Why the lack of Warthog by default here?
Over the course of development on the map, we made more of the routes support just on foot more with cover and kind of encroached into some of the playable space area. So while Warthogs can get around here fairly easily, whenever you have two Warthogs engaging each other, sometimes they'll get cramped up in some of these areas. So we decided to remove those from the initial map selection. So ghosts, however, you can get into all kinds of little tight nooks and crannies, but because they can strafe, it's easier to manage having the ghost on areas like these rampings because you can
you're driving on the sidewalk.
You can get through the tighter doorways because you can strafe.
Yeah, you could be, if you do decide to head up onto those areas, you can easily be grenaded or boarded.
Absolutely, because they're much tighter areas, it gives ample opportunity for people to steal your vehicle from you, to board you, to destroy your vehicle if you're trying to get through those little choke points and nooks and crannies. But there's plenty of little routes and stuff that get around here really easily, giving you lots of time to splatter people and get around the map fairly quickly whenever you're in.
I guess it'd be worth asking about the Banshee as well. It seems like it could be a fun Banshee level, but I'm not seeing one of those by default either.
Yeah, because this is built for more 4v4 and smaller scale than BTB maps, we tend to shy away from using the Banshee because it's a dominant vehicle if you don't have a coordinated team able to take it down.
That is true.
So one of the last areas in this map, which we hadn't really shown too much, is this back silo area, which again gives you shots into the center structure, and it gives you an area to be covered while you're engaging people that are trying to control the rooftops.
What maps do you like, or excuse me, what game types do you personally like to play on this map?
This is, for me, Infinity Slayer is awesome on this map. I like Flood as well. And actually, the Oddball has a lot of potential here because of the distinct differences in all of the areas and all of the various strategies that we've seen evolve over time as people have tried to control certain locations which are advantageous to having the oddball in.
Well, that is complex. One of 10 Halo 4 maps. We are profiling them all with the multiplayer designers from 343. So for more on Halo 4 and Halo 4 multiplayer, keep it locked right here to IGN.
Ordnance ready.
Hey everybody, I'm Ryan McCaffrey with IGN. We are up here at 343 Industries talking with Kynan Pearson, the lead multiplayer level designer on Halo 4. Kynan, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
We are going to check out all 10 Halo 4 multiplayer maps, so be sure to click over to all of them on IGN. Which one are we going to take a look at right now?
All right, so right now we're going to take a look at EXILE. EXILE is a large-scale vehicular map. It's cylindrical, it's a donut, effectively, with a lot of reinforceable areas on the outside, and then some structures that cut through the middle for some shortcuts and routes and base defense. This map, fictionally, is a crash site where they reinforced a makeshift base out of the materials that were provided by the crash debris and everything of the ship. They kind of had to reinforce that area to survive. All right, so as I was talking about before, getting into the vehicle stuff, a donut is basically a description of a map that has an area that goes around the map completely. So if you look at the shape of a donut, there's a hole in the middle. This isn't really a hole, just in the description of the route. You're blocked off from the center in terms of your vehicle pathing. So you can just clean drive around the outer edge of the path, back and forth. It creates a nice loop. There's multiple routes that you take within the donut, but as you can see, I can make it from one end of the map to the other. I can turn around and go the other way, and there's just really nice vehicle combat areas. It makes vehicles fun to drive. You're not running into stuff constantly, but there's plenty of areas for ground units to kind of spring surprise attacks on the players. They're going around and do stuff.
I see a lot of opportunity here to just load up a gunner in the Warthog and just start doing donuts around the donut to take out various enemies.
Absolutely. So all maps, whenever you're going through the design process, you want to make sure, because it's easy to cut through the center of a map to get from point A to point B, you try and build maps outside in so that the outer edges of the map are still as usable as the center of the map. They're reinforceable. So if you're going around on the outer edge of the map, there's reason for you to do that.
Right.
You can still engage people. There's some power positions that you can hold within the different structures. So we've got some turrets out here. But as you can see, just any of these areas, like if somebody is over here and they're exposed out in the middle, it's actually, even though it takes a lot longer to make it around the map, it's a valid strategy to use the outer area of the map. That's one of the things that Halo maps have done really well.
Yeah, you don't want to build a multiplayer map and then have people only use half or 2/3 of it, right?
Absolutely. And if you make the areas on the outside of the map invalid, then people will just cut through the middle, and they'll always take the shortest route. So this is just showing that we've got quick access routes to get from outer edges into the center, so that even if you go around the outside and you're using cover and going for objective points, that there's still great reason to go outer in rather than having to worry about
So there
shortcuts.
is a Banshee. We haven't seen too many of them by default in the multiplayer maps. You explained why in another of our map videos. But here we have one, and it's got all its same bag of tricks as it's always had, right?
Absolutely. You can still do dodges, you can do your flips, and then you can reorient yourself. You have your standard weaponry. You've also got Banshee bombs, so you can deliver some devastating damage, and you can boost. So you can splatter ground units, you can get around the map fairly easily.
And I trust it's still possible if the driver gets close enough and you've got a skilled enough player on foot to board a Banshee.
Absolutely. So there are some certain choke points that the Banshee needs to kind of, you don't have to go through this, but people tend to. So we give lots of opportunities to board the Banshee. Plus, you can have a plasma pistol in your default loadout. So at any given time,
just bring
as the Banshee is going down, you can EMP it, run over, and take it.
Now, do you find when you're designing a large-scale multiplayer map like this, is it harder or easier to do than one of the smaller or mid-sized maps?
A lot of times the larger maps, because they have to support vehicles and ground units, are more difficult in terms of their layouts. Because you have to make it valid for players to do both things.
Right.
And when you're building a path in terms of a vehicle route or whatever, you need to make it comfortable for the vehicle to turn around, do donuts, and engage people. But those areas still have to feel good at the scale of the player if they're on foot and trying to get away from vehicles. You don't want the map to feel empty. That's another one of the things where, because we have sprint by default, you're actually able to get around the map fairly easily. And just as Banshee defense right now, we have the Goshawk, so you can take the Banshee out fairly easily as long as you've got some good aim and you're not a sitting duck for the Banshee bomb.
Now, on paper, how does this map start when you sit down with it? Does it start with the donut and you think, okay, big scale map, I want to ring around it so the vehicles can get around, and then build from there? How's the creative process on this?
Yeah, so typically, and for this map specifically, the outer routes and the vehicle routes are set very early on. So you know what space the map takes up in terms of how long it takes a vehicle to make it around and what area feels good for just driving. And then it's kind of like spacing out things like the amount of time that it takes to run from one side to the other on foot to make sure that you're not fully exposed to long-range weapons and that the lines of sight are appropriate so that if I'm running around on foot, as you can see, I can defend myself from people shooting long range within certain areas so that I can make my way across the map into the center area. The next is what it takes to define the scale of the structure that goes through the center area. And you want this to feel great and feel good and take enough time so that it's not a way to completely shortcut the routing of the map for the vehicles and make those obsolete. So,
what game types are well suited to this? Obviously, bigger team things, but is this going to be Halo 4's go-to capture the flag map, for instance?
This is actually really good for capture the flag, and for a BTB map, it's great for objective types. Dominion's one that functions really well on here, but also Flood is really good on this map, even though it's a large scale map. There's a lot of interesting things that you can do with Flood. Dominion and Capture the Flag are all well supported, but it's a favorite in the studio for just simple BTB Slayer. Team Slayer.
How about on the armor ability side? I'm thinking maybe the thrust pack could be useful here to just do some quick dodging when you're out in the open field, maybe duck out of the way of an oncoming warthog.
Yeah, regen field is actually really good here, as well as shield and thruster pack. So shield is great because you can be on the outer edges of the map. If somebody's trying to engage you, then you can kind of pop your shield out and duck around a corner. Regen field as well, because you've got big groups running around, so you can set up some reinforced areas up on these decks so you can fire down and dodge around and make sure that whenever you're taking damage from people as they're running around, that you're able to recover some health.
Because the regen field in Halo 4 will actually heal your teammates as well, correct? Anybody that's inside it?
Yep. So that's a positive one to use in this map.
Now, I've been lucky enough to play this map for a previous bit of Halo 4 coverage, which you can of course find on IGN. And in that session, I remember a Scorpion tank popping up. Is it in here by default, or will it show up based on various custom or certain game types?
Yeah, Scorpion is in here by default. I will run to it now. But again, all the game modes have their own settings, so it doesn't make sense to have a Scorpion available on something like Flood.
Right.
But for the appropriate game types, objective game types and whatnot, you have the tank. The tank is great in this map, and it's another power vehicle that you have to contend with. But again, because you have things like the Goshawk and the Banshee, as well as plasma pistols, you have to have a coordinated team to be able to make sure that it's safe.
course, the Scorpion's been a favorite going back to Halo 1 multiplayer. Is this the only one of the 10 maps that has a Scorpion in it by default?
Scorpions are available in some of the other maps and mode types, but this one I believe might be one of the only Scorpions supported by default maps. Yeah.
So as you're designing this, you know you want a big map with the ring around it, so vehicles can get around. You know, do you definitely, before you even sketch something out, do you start with a list of, okay, I want a map that I can drive a Warthog, Ghost, and Scorpion around in, or does it start with, oh, let's start with the Warthogs and see how it goes, and then do you add the other vehicles one by one?
A lot of times we have an expanded sandbox, so we have a lot of vehicles, and we've introduced some new vehicles. So typically we'll try and figure out the map scales first, and then see which vehicles work best on the maps, and then define a nice spread so that we get enough usage out of the vehicles and give people enough opportunities to play with their favorite vehicles. So it kind of has to do with the overall package and not necessarily the specific details, though we test very heavily to make sure that everything works really well.
I'm curious, so the Scorpion's in here by default, which of course we all love. Why, for instance, as you're designing this map and you think, okay, we're going to put a Scorpion in here by default, why the Scorpion over, say, the Wraith?
Again, it comes down to variety. We have maps that highlight the Wraith, and really it's which vehicle works best in the scenario and doesn't end up being a dominant factor during the testing process.
Right.
So the Scorpion requires a different scale than the Wraith does in terms of map production, because the Scorpion kind of has to have a larger area for turning around because it's a longer vehicle. So something like the Wraith, while it may totally function in this map and be positive, we might not use it by default just because we wanted to highlight the tank, or that the tank worked out really well for a certain mode.
Has there been any significant change to this map from when you guys first built it and had it playable to what's in the box?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first iterations of the map had the crashed vehicle right in the center of the map, and it actually had a crashed Covenant ship, so that played a more significant part fictionally as well as layout. And just in terms of some of the structures and everything, they've evolved massively from the first iteration of the level.
Well, I think that's all the excellent highlights from Exile. We're going to move on, take a look at some other maps. For all 10 map overviews for Halo 4, be sure to keep it locked right here to IGN. What's up, everybody? I'm Ryan McCaffrey with IGN, here with Kynan Pearson, the lead multiplayer level designer at 343 Industries on Halo 4. And Kynan, you are walking us through all 10 Halo 4 multiplayer maps, giving us the behind the scenes, the strategy, the everything important you need to know coming up for the November 6th launch day. So which map are we going to take a look at now?
All right, so the map we're going to look at now is Haven. Haven is a small-scale 4v4 arena-based map. Takes place on some harmonic resonance platforms that are believed to sustain the existence of artificial suns. It's a great competitive space. It's a small-scale map, and even though it's small, there's plenty of opportunities for long lines of sight, long-range engagements. But even if you're playing a 1v1 match, this is the map that you want to go to because you can locate each other fairly well, and it's it's competitive and even.
So definitely another sort of ring-like feel here a little bit, going around the outer edge, funneling towards the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's this level is symmetrical along one axis. You have the lower ground area here, which is one team spawn start. You have the big central middle arena, which we're looking at here. And then you have the other team, which spawn back over here by this drop-down double ramp section. So the entire map, it's 2 stories. So you have these outer halls that will lead you into the center. You have a man cannon here that you can take that comes across and brings you into the center easily. But the spice from the level comes from these jump gaps. And these jump gaps highlight one of the best features of Halo, the ability to engage people and jump and fire while you're going across.
Or get fired at.
Or get fired at. The great thing is, because these jump gaps are here, if I'm engaging somebody and my shields pop, I can actually just backpedal and fall safely onto the ground floor and then kind of get out of battle and find opportunities to do different things.
Unless, of course, you drop down in the middle of another firefight going on.
Absolutely, which is always a possibility, but your radar can kind of show you where things are happening if you pay close attention to it. There are these little pedestals up here giving you a little bit of additional coverage, and they're good grounds to kind of sit and isolate certain areas. You have these little cubbies in the back that you can actually drop down there, and I can show you that real fast. So this is just another set of ramps that take you back around, and you can kind of change your path to go back into the center if you want. But it's really easy to understand where you're at. Again, these are transparent, so you can see if somebody's down there, or they can see if you're up here. So you can do the drop down and immediately run for access there, or you can start heading back up towards this middle.
Now, how do you decide, this map's obviously Forerunner architecture, how do you decide how you're going to visually theme each level? Do you decide that ahead of time, or do you build the map first and then think, oh, okay, this would look good as a UNSC military theme area?
A lot of time when we're doing the map layout and mock-ups, in terms of what the space is, the space can kind of define the theming of the level. So this one we knew from the start that it was going to be a Forerunner level dealing with Forerunner architecture. And this was kind of one of the levels that we were developing very early in the game. So this became a test bed for some of our early mode development and early kind of delving into the Forerunner structures and architecture. So when theming out a level, you know if you're going to have the angular surfaces and kind of the layouts that wouldn't make sense for a UNSC area or a Covenant area, that can start defining the theming of the map. But we have a really good concept team here who will basically do paint overs on the geo that's been constructed and make it look beautiful anyway. So sometimes we define it up front, and other times they'll just come back with something that we didn't expect that's amazing anyways.
So it looks like no vehicles on this map.
Definitely no vehicles on this map. We do put them in the Forge palette. If you just kind of want to make a custom game and you go in, you can put, I think I have Mongoose and Ghost available in this map. So while we don't have them in default types, we let you mess around with them in customs.
Now, I've been lucky enough to play this map a little bit, and I've played a round of Regicide here, which proved to be amazing on this map. Can you talk a little bit about maybe how Regicide functions on this map and your other personal favorite game types for this level?
Yeah, so Regicide is definitely a showcase for this map in particular because it's a free-for-all mode. The map, there's always multiple routes into any of the areas, so there's 3 routes everywhere to get to any area. So it's really difficult to kind of reinforce one specific location for too long. So Regicide's great because the entire flow of the map all goes out towards the center, but there's plenty of areas to run and plenty of routes that you can take and change elevation. So anytime you're trying to locate the king, you know exactly where he's at. The map is small enough that you can pretty much sprint to reach the areas where combat encounters are taking place. And then there's all the little things of being able to jump around, come into little cubbies, and then get out and find coverage. I think in general, this is one of the maps that we end up doing a lot of our 4v4 Team Slayer on, as well as free-for-all modes, because the scale of the map just allows you to have encounters pretty much anywhere, get into battle really fast, but also, as you can see, there's lots of little interesting lines of sight to find people running around and be able to engage people quickly and have some kind of little sneaky things that you do.
I know they vary depending which mode you're playing, but are there power weapons by default on this map, and where can we find those? And what was that trick you just did right there? Let's do that again. That's a pro move for sure. That I think if you're watching this video, you're gonna surprise your friends once or twice by doing that.
So we do leave a little few areas where we have these routes, these secret routes that they're not really secret because I mean you can tell that it's ramped here, but it requires you to kind of sprint run and then you can jump back into this area. So it's just a fast way to get up here. You can run the back route, which is not too much further than this, where you have these ramping areas.
Right.
But that's definitely a little pro tip shortcut that you can take to kind of get back up into the middle if you do an immediate drop down and somebody turns around and thinks that you're kind of getting out of battle.
So how about the power weapons then? Before we had to interrupt to learn a developer secret.
Yeah, so we've got initial ordnance. The scatter shot's really good here because the scatter shot has reflective fire, so you can kind of bank shots around if somebody's sitting in this little cubby and everything, and you start just firing the scatter shot here. The shots can actually kind of just reflect and fill this area. We have the Needler, which is a power weapon that has made a comeback and
Did you just call the Needler a power weapon?
Yeah, the Needler is in fact a power weapon because it has guided shots in terms of once your reticle's red, it's really easy to fill somebody up so that they can super combine. But yeah, it's one of those things where if you come across somebody with a Needler, there's actually something to fear.
We've come such a long way from Halo 1 multiplayer where the Needler was the laughing stock. So what else can we learn about this map?
Well, the good thing is, that even though the map is fully symmetrical, it's easy to tell which side you're on whenever you're spawning because the flow of the map. You can see that these little indicators here on the halls kind of have these little sweeping lines. So whenever you're having encounters in these areas, you've got some coverage in the pillars that are in the center, but you always know which ones are leading towards which area just because of the sweep of this and the window structures. The other thing, though, is that right now you can see with the drop downs and the jumps that even if you're backpedaling, we took a lot of time to make sure that you're not going to like backpedal, fall, and run off. And this is another one of the things where we have the little support structures, and the pads down here are wide enough that for the most part you have to kind of commit to jumping off, trying to do something like jetpack or whatever to fall to your death.
Now you mentioned that this was one of the first levels that you guys really had up and running, that you used it to sort of test out a lot of things. So has it changed and evolved through that process since it's been around one of the longest?
During the arting process, a lot of things were addressed or shifted, but for the most part, the general flow of the level has remained the same. And ultimately, it was one of those things where when we started making this, we wanted to have something that had a traditional Halo feel, would fit comfortably into any Halo really, and could function, but also that just had its own unique elements that capitalized on some of the things that we were doing with the armor abilities that we have and the weapon types that we've provided.
And finally, speaking of armor abilities, I've been asking you on just about every map we've been profiling, what, depends on game type, sure, but what are your personal picks for armor abilities that suit this map well?
So for me, it's thruster pack all day on this map. Other people will speak to other things, but I think just the fact that you've got these corners, it's a really tight-knit map. Whenever you're engaging people at distance or whatever, you can kind of do this until your shield's pop and then thrust over. But again, the shield is always a good thing to have, just to be able to back out of combat as well. Jetpack will give you some minor opportunities on the outside, but we've got the lower ceilings in here. You're not really going to break the flow of the map.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, that is Haven. And for more on all 10 Halo 4 multiplayer maps, breakdowns of all 10 with the designers from 343 Industries, keep it locked right here to IGN.
King still leading.
Hey Hey everybody, it's Ryan McCaffrey from IGN. We're here at 343 Industries, chatting with Kynan Pearson, the lead multiplayer level designer on Halo 4. He's been kind enough to give us a tour of every single Halo 4 multiplayer map, all 10 of them. And Kynan, which one are we going to take a look at now?
Right now we're taking a look at Longbow. Longbow is a large-scale BTB map. It supports vehicles and it takes place in a frigid remote climate where they use powerful channel-based mass drivers to launch monitoring relays deep into space.
I'm very anxious to see this one because when you scale large scale with vehicles and ice, it reminds me, of course, of Sidewinder from Halo 1. So let's see what it actually looks like.
All right, so getting started, it looks like I've started at B base. So during Dominion, you can see that there's different base structures in the map. So we've got two on the outside edge of the map, one located here, the other on the opposing side, mirrored over here. We have a central base structure right here. And then while these don't play into the Dominion support, you also have bases on the outer sides of the map. As you can see, when we transition, we've got snow-based on this side, and for side differentiation on the other side, you can see that it transitions
to dirt,
to more gravel and more melted. So the base on the other side is located back in this section. So these are little areas that you can reinforce, pick up the sniper rifle, go back in here and kind of stay out and get some long lines of sight in for flag defense. One of the flag points is here, the other is on the opposing side in the mirrored fashion. But again, so we have vehicles in here, we have Banshee, we have the Warthogs and Ghosts. And during some types, you'll also have access to the Wraith. But you can see the vehicle routes are, you've got tire tracks embedded, so you've got a clear understanding of where you're headed, what you can do. There's lifts that you can see that lead you up into this central base structure up here.
Oh yeah, quick way up.
As well as the ramps for on-foot routes so that you have some easy access there. Plus from each of the outcropping extensions, like these, there's a land bridge that takes you right up into the base here.
So astute viewers who've been following our Halo 4 coverage may have seen our big multiplayer blowout back in September. And if they watched that, they saw this map being played with the Dominion, one of the new game modes. Can you kind of talk us through how Dominion works and as it pertains specifically to this map, to Longbow?
Yeah, so on Longbow, when you're playing Dominion, there's three bases in, that are active, A, B, and C. And as you take a base, there's a terminal on the inside of the base that you would move to. And right here, the terminal would be located here. You hold X, and that starts the process for taking the base. Once the timer has gone down, the base will be in your team's control. And as the base is in your team's control, there's a timer that counts down to the base reinforcements and for resupply. And what happens is over time, as you hold the base will level up and it'll activate shield barriers in the doorways or activate turrets on the outside, on the upper deck that you can actually you can restore once they've gone down. But once the turrets are active, then they'll be automated defenses, allowing you to hold the base against people that are coming in to try and take it. In addition, for the base leveling up, you'll have things like vehicle spawns that activate. So here's where the Banshee would show up.
Ah, okay.
And then on the outside, you'd get access to Ghosts. So yeah, holding the base longer makes the base level up faster, and it makes it take a little more time to take. If you control all three of the bases simultaneously, it puts the opposing team into last stand. And what last stand is it prevents them from respawning if they die, but it gives them all overshields to kind of give them a little boost towards taking another base.
Interesting.
If you kill everybody in last stand, then you win the mode without having to just basically gain points by holding the bases. So this is one of the other bases, the smaller scale bases. And you can see that there's little routes on the outside. There's also a vehicle route on the backside, which is wide enough to kind of take a Wraith back. But it also gives you an alt route to travel from one of the lower bases to the other. In some modes, we have some of the routes cut off, but you can see here that there's actually this little structure that gives you an interconnect that also cuts through the big kind of cliff area right here.
So there's a lot of ground to cover here. What armor abilities might be beneficial to this map?
Well, vehicles definitely help you cover a lot of ground. Again, we've constructed a lot of different areas to allow for support for all of the armor ability types, but camo comes in handy just because of the size of the map and some of the opportunities you have for kind of hiding out in some of the back areas if you're a sniper and you want to look for getting the drop on people. Jetpack can assist, though we've made some really easy routes to get up and down, and the vehicles also help you cover just as much ground. Here's the route whenever you're taking the bottom to come up from the lift to assault this base as well. Early on in development, whenever we were working on this map, it's pretty much kept the layout as it is, but we did find that these areas were open up here, so people were engaging long range constantly from this position, and this ended up becoming a little more powerful than we wanted it to be.
So hence those walls there?
Hence those walls. We cut off some of the lines of sight, made it a little more awkward to have the engagements between those areas without players committing to one area or another. Yeah.
Any particular custom game types that you enjoy that might work well here?
Yeah, I mean, anything that revolves rockets with infinite ammo, you know, it's always going to be fun. Messing around with increasing play speed, just there's all kinds of things that you can play around with the character customization options, changing gravity settings and all that. So any large scale map is going to leave you ample opportunity to kind of do a little more dramatic movement shifts or adjusting the player package a little more.
And this could be a good map once you attain your specialization. If you were playing with the Wheelman specialization, you could earn some points in here by driving the Warthog around. Absolutely, that's a great point. This is a great map for driving the Warthog and just being a gunner. It's music to my ears. Well, that is Longbow. And for more on all 10 Halo 4 multiplayer maps, we've got tours of them all. Keep it locked right here to IGN. Hey everybody, it's Ryan McCaffrey with IGN. We're here at 343 Industries checking out all 10 Halo 4 multiplayer maps with the game's lead multiplayer level designer, Kynan Pearson. Kynan, which map are we checking out right now? Right now we're going to take a look at Meltdown. So this map is a large-scale vehicular map. It's got a lot of routes that go through and around kind of a central bridge structure. It takes place on a moon where there's kind of a catastrophic reactor meltdown going on. You've already described the greatest multiplayer map ever. That's the greatest description I could possibly think of for a Halo map. So you mentioned in one of the other videos that you've got sort of a mental checklist. You guys wanted to do some smaller maps, some medium maps, some objective maps, large-scale stuff. You mentioned this is a large-scale vehicular map. What inspired this particular level? So this level was built from a need that we had to do a certain level structure. We call it the infinity loop. And the infinity loop is basically a giant figure eight that vehicles can drive and that they converge in the center. Which was Infinity was a fantastic multiplayer map in Halo PC. So in this particular map, this is also one that's built around large-scale objective. It's symmetrical in its design. There are some asymmetrical elements in terms of minor rock placement and stuff like that. But you have callouts. You have the side that is all snow,
And then you have a few little structures. There's some interconnected teleporters that will take you from the main bases into the smaller side bases. But this is the center of the map. So within the center of the map, you have this bridge right in the middle.
Right.
And that connects the top of the infinity loop. But if you wind around the outside of the map, then you'll end up coming around in the bottom.
And I see
the
two
bottom,
large man cannons on the side over there.
Yep, passes below. I'll get to the purpose of the man cannons and show you some of the cool stuff that we've got going on that feeds into the Halo sandbox. But in particular, you can kind of cruise around, and I'll give you a view of the general layout, the infinity loop that is the vehicle routing. So you can see that you can pretty much make this figure 8 formation when you're in a Ghost or another vehicle. And then it comes around here. But these little cannons on the side will allow you to hop in them on vehicles and put yourself up here, or you can do it on foot. They work both ways. So it's just a quick route for players to be able to kind of backpedal and come up. So those affect both players and vehicles at the same time. And then we also have ones that'll take you immediately into the center bridge structure.
Oh, look at that. So really, you're really sort of literally and figuratively just channeling everybody towards the center of that figure 8.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily to say that most of the combat happens in that area, because we have these basically defensible locations, these bases. So you see these giant structures, which are kind of your landmark callouts on each side. We have the reactors open there, where you come inside, and then you have your combat areas here when you're trying to defend once you're on the inside of each of these structures, which are on both sides of the map. And then we have your little shortcut routes. These will lead you out to the upper deck, but if you go below, you also have vehicle spawn locations, and then kind of running back into the structure and towards the top deck, you'll see that there's the shortcut route, which takes you to the teleporter that spawns you at the little side base, which gives you a nice view to kind of do some sniping if you
Interesting.
If you will.
We don't see teleporters too much in Halo over the last couple of games. What's do you generally try to shy away from those, except on bigger maps like this?
It's always what works for the map. We don't necessarily shy away from teleporters. We like using them if they facilitate a purpose, but we don't want to use them if it's not built for a specific reason. So if we find that we need them, then it's definitely a possibility to put them in, though it's more dynamic whenever you're launching from a man cannon and able to fire midair while you're traveling around. It's less disorienting to players to do that. But yeah, the teleporters here work out really well, and definitely allow players to use more of the side routes to their advantage during gameplay.
This map certainly begs the question. We see the vehicles on the lower part of the figure 8. Banshee in here at all?
There is no Banshee in here. That being said, it's definitely something that may make an appearance. It's possible to place the Banshees in custom game types. But you can see that we've got these little interconnected foot routes. So while it does seem like the map is scaled to have a lot of vehicle routes going through the map, just running around on foot is definitely supported with the amount of cover that you have, and you've got a lot of interesting multi-layered verticality to deal with whenever you're having cross-map engagements.
Seems like a potentially great capture the flag map here.
Yeah, absolutely. CTF works out really well here. Any of the BTB modes, Dominion is definitely a plus, and then a few others.
So do you literally, when you start working on this map, did you just sketch a figure 8 on a piece of paper and go,
Not necessarily. Most of the time, we'll have ideas of kind of the flow of the map. So knowing that the infinity loop is something that works out really well and gives you some interesting dynamics, and it differentiates it from some of the the linear structures that you get where it's just base to base across landmass, or the donut structures. This was something where mocking it up and building it in 3D definitely shows more of what the map can do and helps you define what the scale of everything needs to be. So while paper layouts do come into play, it's more along the lines of you don't know a map until you've built it.
Sure. Now, of course, ice has long played a role, and snow has long played a role in Halo, going back to Halo 1. Can you, is the traction of the vehicles affected at all by the weather conditions here?
Traction is not affected by the snow in the map, and we don't have any icy patches or anything that you're driving over that would cause you to skid around, so we didn't mess with the vehicle physics in that regard.
Do you find that that's just takes away from the gameplay?
No, I mean, there could definitely be ways to use that. We just didn't look at that as something that we wanted to focus on in this map.
And how has this map evolved over time? I mean, it's because we've already talked about, if you watch some of the other videos, we've got a couple of other big scale, big team battle maps. So where does sort of this one fit in with Halo 4's other big team battle maps, stuff like Longbow and EXILE? Yeah,
so because it's got all the interconnected routes between the areas, you have a lot of opportunities for close quarters combat and getting the drop on people in some of these little interesting areas where you've got the interiors to give people a little bit of a rat's nest to crawl through. But this one in particular specifically was about kind of the convergence in the middle of the map, which we've talked about with this bridge area, but also just messing around with the vehicle man cannons and the different man cannons all taking you into a lot of areas. It was something that was good to have just this canyon that you would go through where you could have engagements on upper ridges, lower ridges, and have to contend with the vehicles swinging around at high speed. It was an experience we didn't have with the other maps, so we wanted to definitely provide some variety and give people a unique take.
Could be interesting if you played a game type of shotguns and sniper rifles here.
Yeah, shoddy sniper game type would work out really well in this environment, because not only do you have the really long lines of sight, but there's also ways to be sneaky and prevent damage with the amount of cover that you have lining all of the various routes in the level.
So would camo be a good armor ability here?
Camo absolutely would be great for this map. Jetpack does work out really well, but even hologram comes in handy just in terms of throwing people off, because firing at distance and catching people off guard coming out of little cubbies, there's always opportunity to surprise them and give them a distraction.
Well, that is Meltdown. For detailed developer walkthroughs of all 10 Halo 4 multiplayer maps, keep it focused right here at IGN. Hey everybody, it's Ryan McCaffrey from IGN, joined by Tynan Pearson, the lead multiplayer level designer at 343 Industries. On Halo 4, he is being kind enough to take us on a behind-the-scenes strategic developer insight tour of all 10 Halo 4 multiplayer maps. This one is called Ragnarok, and something tells me I'm going to like this one a lot.
Yeah, this map may be familiar to you if you're a Halo fan. This is the return of a curious gorge that was once in a Halo title before.
Well, that narrows it down to 2 maps, so let's see which one it is.
All right, Ragnarok is the return of Valhalla.
One of Halo 3's finest maps, for sure. What has changed about it?
So we've kept the layout, hills, and structures mostly the same. There's been additional art detail put in, but we've also had to make a few minor changes to certain things to make sure that the vehicles function with our current sandbox and that the level flows with the new details of the default player package. So as you get in here, you can see that this is the Valhalla that you know and love,
except
reimagined
way prettier
as Ragnarok. So the Forerunner structures have changed. We've got you know, all new artistic details and elements that have been added. Let's take you through a tour of the interior of the base. So coming in here, you can see that still familiar elements, minor things have been added, but
do we still go inside the base to pick up the battle rifle?
No, that's actually changed. Weapon placement has changed in the map just based on the initial ordnance and the new ordnance system. Plus, because you can spawn with a BR immediately in your custom loadout,
yes.
There's no need to actually have it placed in the same location.
So do we still have a power weapon in the middle of the map?
There are power weapons in the map. Some of the initial ordnance actually spawns randomized locations of power weapons, one of which is the binary rifle, which is a one-shot precision kill weapon. It's the Forerunner sniper rifle, but the interesting detail about it is that whenever you do pick it up and you zoom in, there's a red laser leading exactly back to where you're pointing at, and it can kill in one hit any location. So you can graze somebody's toe and they will still disintegrate. So yeah, you can see familiar routes, familiar paths. Again, some of the details of certain jumps and how the rocks are shaped and some of those details have definitely changed. But for the most part, it's incredibly familiar and still plays just as great, though in a completely new way with the updated Halo 4 sandbox elements and loadouts.
So we have, back by the base, we have a Warthog, we have a Ghost, but we also have something else.
Yeah, one of the new additions and something that dramatically changes the way that Valhalla plays is the Mantis. So getting into the Mantis, you can see that the lines of sight in Valhalla from its original inception still definitely allow for good coverage when you're in vehicles.
Now, how can we, you guys have made a lot of updates so that the Banshee isn't as overpowered. You know, you can use, or the Scorpion, you've slowed the Scorpion down, you can halt it by hitting it with an overcharged plasma pistol. What is the defense against this terrifying looking walking mech?
Well, the other vehicles do stand a chance. You have the Banshee, which creates some interesting and dynamic fights between the opposing Mantises. In addition, you do have Plasma Pistol, which can EMP the mech, and power weapons. If everyone's focus firing, you can pop the Mantis's shields, as well as doing enough damage to take it down with enough focus fire from the team.
So are there any vulnerable points to the pilot at all? Like, can you hit him in the head from behind or anything like that?
As far as I'm aware, there's definitely, there's not a specific weak spot against it, though you can mount the Mantis and plant grenades.
Can you board it? Can you take the Mantis?
You can destroy it. You can't take someone out of it.
Okay.
So otherwise, that changes the way that that Valhalla feels, or Ragnarok are reimagining. But the other thing is that with the addition of armor abilities, which is new to the way that you would traditionally think about Valhalla, it changes the dynamic of the level quite a bit.
How so? I'd love to hear an example or two out of that. What couple of armor abilities might really shift the way this map plays and feels?
Well, first and foremost, sprint by default means that you can cover a lot more ground without the use of vehicles. So it gives you a little bit of an advantage in getting out of some of the distance combat. The other thing is just in general, you've never played Valhalla with armor abilities. So everything from jetpack to thruster pack, the shield, regen field, just camo. They all change the way that the map feels and some of the strategies that you can use. And the cool thing is that we've seen a lot of dynamic fights happen over certain areas that you would never get in Halo 3.
Now, Halo games, every Halo game, of course, obviously since the first one, has brought back maps from previous Halo games because they're just, Halo, if nothing else, is known for its classic multiplayer maps. What made you guys, when you're putting Halo 4 together and you've got your new sandbox, you've got your new vehicles and armor abilities, what makes you sit down and go, you know what, let's bring back Valhalla?
Well, we definitely knew that we wanted to bring back a map, or we knew that we wanted to have a return to something that people had fond memories of, and Valhalla was always a favorite in the studio. And when we were looking at the BTB maps that we had and the large scale maps and the small and mid, it was the one that always came up to the front as being the most supportive of our sandbox and the one that would work out the best. So, you know, we had definitely experiments with a bunch of different maps, but this one came out on top just because it's such a great Halo map, and it just does so many things that we wanted to take advantage of. So rather than build something that facilitated the same purpose, why not bring back one of the best?
Any pro tips for Valhalla this time around?
I guess it's basically making sure that you have a coordinated team in regards to the usage of the Banshee and the Mantis. So don't try and go toe-to-toe with the Mantis with the Banshee unless you're in an advantageous situation, because, you know, depending on the exchange, if you're flying too high, then the Mantis can mow down the Banshee with the chain gun and missiles.
That actually brings up a good point before we close out this particular video. Is the Banshee good for coordinating a team effort, and should you use it to protect the Mantis? Can the two of you, I mean, the Mantis is obviously very slow and the Banshee is very quick, but if you sort of circle around the Mantis, is that a good way to protect your player in the Mantis?
It's definitely possible. I mean, the great thing about the Halo sandbox is that everybody plays differently, and it's up to teams to kind of define their own strategies. We've found with some of the teams that we've put together on competitive modes that protecting the Mantis works really well even with just a ground team. Just people clearing them out and making sure that the Mantis isn't fully exposed and out of cover. But again, a good Banshee flyer, you know, is always going to be devastating with the Banshee bomb, which makes a comeback. So making sure that you use cover and, you know, keep out of range of some of the longer range power weapons, you'll be able to defend the Mantis with a Banshee. So coordination is always good. Although
now that I actually think about it, maybe would the Ghost be a better protector, because you really can just sort of stay with him and circle around him.
It's possible. Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about Halo is, like, it's up to people to kind of experiment with the things that they feel might work, and you might be able to test that whenever you play yourself. So let me know what you think whenever you you get in there and you're trying to find a way to protect your Mantis.
Well, that is Valhalla returning as Ragnarok. Keep it locked to IGN for developer walkthroughs of all 10 Halo 4 multiplayer maps.
5 kills to win. 5 minutes remain. Ordnance ready.
Hey everybody, Ryan McCaffrey from IGN here, joined by Kynan Pearson, the lead multiplayer level designer at 343 Industries on Halo 4. We are at 343 in the greater Seattle area, getting a detailed, personal developer walkthrough on all 10 Halo 4 multiplayer maps. Kynan, which of the 10 are we checking out right now?
Right now we're taking a look at Solace. So Solace is, again, it's a small mid, 4v4 objective map. It's symmetrical in layout, though there's asymmetrical base designs on either end, although it's symmetrical on one axis. This one's a double-decker level. It's basically a testament to the Forerunner's technological prowess, and they're suspending the death of a star, so you'll be able to see the sun in the background.
Obviously a very Forerunner level here, but with the UNSC has clearly moved in and set up shop.
Absolutely. The UNSC has all kinds of reinforcements placed in this level. It's of particular interest to them, of this location. So here you can see that they're suspending the death of this star. So you've got the interconnected beams in this back route. So this is one of the back bases. The map is divided by 2 bases. So at start, players can run up here. There's a sniper rifle available, so they can have some crossfighting here. One of the main attractions of the level, and one of the key features, is this beam that's coming from the lower level to the upper level, and you can see it here. The interesting thing about this beam in particular is if you drop down into the mid, this beam actually functions as a lift that will carry you back up to the top.
It's interesting that you say that because I've been lucky enough to get a chance to play this map, and at first, I literally at first thought that beam's gonna zap me and kill me instantly until I saw somebody else go in it and go flying out.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you quickly discover that it's a benefit rather than a detriment to use the beam. It is risky though, as people can see you kind of drifting through the air. So much like whenever you're using a jetpack, when people are drifting up, they become an easy target for people to locate. But that being said, there are absolutely opportunities to use it in strategic ways when you're playing objective modes or when you drop down to gain a power weapon and want to get it back up into battle.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. Is I remember from playing this, the power weapons are on the lower level in the middle, and was a sword, correct?
Yeah, there's a sword on one side, and then there's actually the incinerator cannon on the other side, and that's the Forerunner. It's kind of like a rocket launcher equivalent, but when it explodes on impact, it sends off a bunch of little explosive particles that will also disintegrate players if they come into contact with them post-launch. Yeah,
it seemed actually even deadlier than a rocket launcher to me in my brief experience with it thus far.
Yep. So the bases themselves are actually asymmetrical in design. They're symmetrical on each side, but the bases are structured differently.
Is that to help tell them apart then?
It's definitely to help tell them apart, and it's to also make the map a little more interesting in terms of having the asymmetrical base structures and kind of change the tactics based on which side you are on. Also, it makes it during free-for-all modes and some other modes to give some differentiation between the ends and allow you to play the map in different ways.
Now this I know, I'm sure it has nothing to do with anything, but it's sort of reminding me a little bit of a slightly larger midship, in that it's just a fairly simple, symmetrical level that seems like it'd be where all the action is going to happen very quickly and very frequently.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of shares a little bit with midship in terms of the structuring, but I mean, the map flow and the things that you do in the level are significantly different. In regards to some of the cross gameplay, you can see that there's a bunch of channels that go down from one side, one entrance of the map to the other. But then you've also got these spots where, for instance, you've got these kind of jump routes that'll allow you to kind of get up into the middle, and these interconnected bridges that will take you towards this center area where you can do the drop down. But the other thing is that depending on which side you're on and how you're going around, you've also got these routes that take you down into the lower level. And in the lower level, you can get some interesting fights because these have routes that go directly into the bases on each opposing end, though structurally they're slightly different. But the good thing is that you also get some cross-fighting here when people are running to get onto the outside as well as to jump into the mid-beam.
Now, I noticed from playing this map, something I was able to use to my advantage early on was up top, there's a lot of low walls, and you might see someone go by and you can just kind of hop over the low walls and get behind them and catch them off guard, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of tactics that you can use to kind of surprise and do some moves based on agility to kind of get the advantage over somebody, or even just, do some clever little things when you're engaging people to get in and out of combat encounters. It's a lot of these things give you some strategy elements that you can use for, basically imposing your will on someone when they're when they're chasing you or whenever you're getting the drop on somebody. Promethean Vision's definitely a good armor ability to have on this map, as well as Thruster Pack, because there's all these little nooks and crannies that you can duck and dodge behind.
Now, you've mentioned in some of the other map walkthroughs that you've designed these maps. You're very much a fan of the jumping gameplay in Halo 4 multiplayer. Was that something that was at the forefront of your mind here, with all those little low walls and things you can hop over?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where when we were working on this map, just coming up with the routes and finding the interesting ways of moving around the map and kind of using some of the the cover and structures to your advantage, as well as just making the encounters that you have with enemies more interesting. Jumping is a critical part of Halo, and because we also had the increased jump height moving back towards the Spartan 4's capabilities, it's just something really fun to play with, and it makes the maps more enjoyable to just kind of mess with when you're playing, and gives you all these elements that are missing from some other first-person shooters that you can kind of take advantage of with Halo Sandbox.
I'm curious, I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the first time I played this map, I thought that the beam in the center was a death beam. Was it ever a death beam at any point in development? You guys decided it was too much of a problem?
Actually, it started off as something that would do damage to players, and over time when we were playing, we thought it would be interesting to convert it to a lift because it actually just worked out better for gameplay and prevented some of the frustrations of just in general dying by an element that's not another player. So
I'll bet some quick CTF games could happen here.
Absolutely, this is a great CTF level. You know, it's multi-flag, and with Halo 4 CTF, the flag carrier has the Magnum, so they can fire and defend themselves while they're running with it. But because the flags spawn on the outer base, there's plenty of routes to take the flag from this location, going down, going side routes, going mid. So it's interesting that how dramatically the CTF game can change, and how sometimes it actually runs a long time, even though it seems like they would happen fairly quickly. It's definitely possible to steamroll and kind of run through and have some quick flag caps, but just because of the variety in the level and the sniper locations at the top here, sometimes you can also prevent flag captures fairly easily if it falls in such an area where you have some nice line of sight towards and control over.
Any other personal favorite game types for this map?
Infinity Slayer, always a favorite. This is also a great regicide supporting map, just because you can get into action quickly, and there's so many different interesting ways of using the cover and kind of bobbing and weaving out of structures and jumping, that it's a great map to play in free-for-all.
Well, that is solace. For more on Halo 4's multiplayer maps, we've got walkthroughs of them all with Kynan. Keep it locked right here to IGN.
Resupply Alpha. Fortifying Charlie. Base offense. Double kill.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan McCaffrey with IGN. We're here at 343 Industries with Kynan Pearson, the lead multiplayer level designer on Halo 4. We're getting a tour of all 10 Halo 4 multiplayer maps. We've reached the end of the alphabet. Vortex is the name of the map we're about to see. This is the 10th one we're looking at. Of course, maybe this is the first video you're watching. We've got all 10 videos. Look them up on IGN.com. Kynan, tell us about Vortex.
So Vortex is a Forerunner space. It's another large-scale vehicular combat map that we have. This one takes place on a Forerunner, in a Forerunner location that ONI's researching. So they've got a base set up there to try and figure out what's happening with this location. Right now they're kind of convinced that these structures are harnessing the planet's wind for power.
So interestingly, if you've watched all of the other multiplayer map video tours with Kynan, this is now our, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4, arguably 5th large-scale multiplayer map. That seems like more than previous Halo games. Have you guys taken more of an emphasis on the larger scale vehicle-friendly maps for Halo 4?
Well, in general, just because we have sprint by default, it means that the scale of some of our maps needed to be a little bigger to facilitate making sure that the time to death and that the encounter times were lengthened enough so that they weren't going by too quickly and people weren't respawning, getting into battle, and dying immediately. So the map scale, by necessity, had to increase just off of that shift. That being said, our mid-scale maps, like mid-large, something like Complex, still works great for 4v4.
Right.
And so while it seems like it's larger, it's actually kind of in our, just in the mid-range rather than large.
Just saying maybe they seem bigger, but they actually play a little bit smaller compared to previous Halo games.
Yeah, with the scale, you can still move around very quickly in the vehicles, but again, just being able to sprint from cover to cover means that you can cover a lot of ground quickly on the larger scale maps. So this map, Vortex, you have this bowl, which is down in the center of the map where everything kind of funnels down towards. And it's fairly wide open, even though there is a large structure that is located above this kind of lower area. Gives you a lot of long lines of sight so that you can have scoped weapon combat, some long range, but also there's ample cover and kind of some separate sub-routes giving you plenty of opportunity for close range and mid-range. Here I just went into the center structure, which when you're playing Dominion ends up being one of the locations that you reinforce. There's routes that you can drop down from in here to make escapes if people are kind of rushing in and you're not ready for combat, but you also have these ramps that go down to some side structures that are located on the outsides of the map.
What vehicles are in here by default?
By default, we have the Wraith, Ghost, Rocket Hog, and...
Rocket Hog, huh?
Yeah. So this version of the map, this mode might not actually have it in, but typically it'll spawn down here in the center of the map for objective game types. So it's right in the middle of the map. Everybody can make a mad rush for the Rocket Hog.
Well, we've seen some of the maps, of course, have the standard Warthog with the machine gun. Some have the Gauss Hog, and now a Rocket Hog. When you're sitting down with a map, what makes you decide on which variant of the Warthog to go with?
Again, it comes down to what the map supports, and we wanted to have a large variety of vehicles, and because we had quite a few variants that we wanted to actually use in the map variants and kind of the different modes, we wanted to take advantage of those. So sometimes that doesn't mean that we get to use them all that often, but we wanted to make sure that people had something that they could go to experience them that wasn't just custom games for fun.
And you did also mention in one of the other map tour videos that, in fact, it was EXILE where the Scorpion was. We were asking about the Scorpion, implementing the Scorpion by default versus the Wraith. Now here you've gone with the Wraith. What makes this map a good fit for the Wraith as opposed to the Scorpion?
Well, the Wraith is a vehicle can strafe, which gives it the capabilities of getting into and out of tighter areas. It doesn't require as much clearance as the Scorpion does, just because in general it's a smaller form factor, it's not as long. So here you can see that the lines of sight in the level actually support kind of the arc of the Wraith shot. Right. So it just works really well for cresting over hills and getting into certain areas, and basically it makes it more interesting to try and fire on people from distance because it's a more skill-based shot. And it can be vulnerable if you take into these center structures just because people can use the plasma pistol to EMP it and gain ground. So you still have to protect it much like you would another power vehicle on the other maps.
All the same countermeasures still work on it, so meaning you try and flank around behind it and get up and hit it with a grenade and destroy it?
Yeah, absolutely. So while there are elements of it that have changed visually and in regards to the tuning, it's very familiar to fans of the Wraith that have enjoyed using it in previous games.
So how has this map evolved over time as it's been tweaked? Because we've got quite a healthy selection of vehicles. You've got these turrets. Where did this map start versus where it's ended up?
So when this map started, there was, prior to defining kind of the structures of the map in terms of where we were going to separate the natural terrain from where the structures were, those have definitely changed in terms of their form and function for supporting Dominion, and where, in fact, we use the bases for the Dominion game type have also changed over time. We've shifted them to work along these edges from this side to the other. just because it keeps Dominion fast-paced, interesting, but we did leave the other base structures in case people, or we created custom variants or whatever that needed to support it lengthwise.
Now that man cannon there on the ground, that'll get you straight into the middle real quick.
Yeah. So right here, the major landmark of the level is this kind of wind tunnel that goes into the center structure. And if you kind of follow along that, it'll bring you over to this man cannon, which is kind of a really direct shortcut route from this end of the map into the main structure.
Now
So,
it looks like if you wanted to be sadistic, you could you get your ghost on that man cannon and be up here with the ghost?
you can get the ghost into the structure just by using the ramps, and you can kind of go up there. But this is not a vehicle man cannon, so it's an infantry only variant of the man cannon for the map balance purposes. But this side also has a equivalent man cannon that'll lift you onto that upper platform. So there's a lot of different routes to get into the central structure, and there's a lot of ways to reinforce kind of the outer base areas.
Now, when does the decision come into play to cut out a vehicle or two from previous Halo games? Like, we don't see the Falcon at all here.
Yeah, that's more of a question that should be directed at our sandbox guys, at our sandbox lead, Chris King. But for the most part, it all depends on what the game needs based on what's happening with all of the sandbox items. So sometimes, we'll experiment with things that just don't tend to work out, or there's any number of factors that might prevent something from making it, or even prioritize something else from going in first.
Well, that is a look at Vortex, and another of the 10 Halo 4 multiplayer maps. Kynan, thanks very much for all things Halo 4. All the multiplayer map tours, you're in the right place, IGN.com.